or take this and that, and you'll get better. Even with cognitive behavioral therapies, we have done good, but we haven't hit the ball out of the park. So we took a step back and we said, well, what can we do with AI? And then what could be different that we could bring to the equation? So if I was to think of the context of our industry, I would say that's the innermost circle that you see on this diagram. So I have the genome approach, I have the drug-based approach, I have a biomarker, a molecular marker approach. And that's where we have started because that's what we could measure. And we're still trying to measure genetic variants. And I've been through a number of sessions here at this conference. I come every year, and I continuously hear the same story that we have 2,000 variants of this new gene that we discovered many years ago. And I'm like, how do we conquer that next, right? Even just to get beyond that. And then there is Craig Venter's discussion on the whole other end, but I can do the whole genome sequence and the whole exome sequence for less than $500. So I waited for that technology to improve. So one of the trials we're trying to launch in India, and for economical reasons, is we are going to bring in multi-comorbidity conditions into the model. So enough about dealing with single disease pathways. All these patients are highly complex. If you imagine a series of, the Olympic rings model, right? And I give you that example because there's a lot of intersections between those circles. We're not measuring intersections. We're not measuring what happens to these patients. If I throw a pebble in a pool and the lake ripples out, we're not measuring those ripples. We're just measuring, where you threw the pebble in, and that's kind of, known, and we identify a biomarker. We don't measure other states. So we began with a context in mind and the outermost area. Could I measure your context all the time? So our premise is 60 to 70% of your health is driven by your phenotype. And could I take your lifestyle, your behaviors, and begin with your context rather than beginning with your disease? And if I can begin with your context and measure that context and be able to correlate some of these factors, then maybe I don't need that treatment pathway. Maybe the treatment is software. Maybe it's something else. And why to begin that journey? So the million N of one is not just a concept for us. It's actually something we're going to go ahead and deploy in 3 populations with diabetes, COPD, and progression to lung cancer. And we're going to do it with 2 different academic medical centers and with a commercial client to be able to understand what happens in real-world evidence studies rather than a trial-driven or drug trial-driven model. So in order to do that, in order to build our technology, we accumulated, you need data. And so we said, well, what kind of data do we need? And then how do we begin this journey? So we have, initially, as a startup, you have to focus on, what can you do with what you have resource-wise. So we have accumulated EHR, EMR data, 100 million patient records. And we have connected that to about 47,000 patients which came out of ICU stay. Highly complex, highly comorbid populations, and we have used their biosensoring data, so actual biometrics, and can we predict the next event within that clinical setting, whether they're in a hospital system, whether they're in a home, whether they're just walking along their neighborhood. How can I get that data back, which tells me about their clinical state? And then we aggregate that with your continuous exposures, which is where the environment and your context comes in. What are you breathing? How far do you live from the street? What's your demographic like, right? I don't know anything about you. I just know inclusion, exclusion